Welcome to Evolve to Succeed, the podcast that brings together entrepreneurs, founders, business leaders and experts to talk about their journeys and explore the link between personal and business success. I'm your host, Warren Munson, founder of Evolve, a coaching, training and development company focused on enabling business and personal success and creating a community of like-minded individuals. Whether that be through our peer groups, one-to-one coaching, our training and development programs for you and your teams, or through our content and events, our mission is to get the best out of each individual and inspire them to be better both in life and in business. If you want to learn more about Evolve, including our beautiful co-working space in Ashley Cross in Poole, then please go to evolvemembers.com, where you'll find great content, insights, details of all of our services, and also information on our forthcoming events. For now though, let's get on with the show. Welcome to this week's episode. Today I'm speaking to Rolph, who together with his brother Harry produced 2 fields olive oil from a small farm in Greece. As you'll hear, olive oil farming was something they both unexpectedly fell into, and it's a great story of love, learning and reconnecting to nature and the value of taking things slowly. Both Will and Harry have found profound meaning in the simple olive, and the act of producing their small batch olive oil has transformed both their lives in significant ways. Amongst other things on this episode, we talk about the brothers' extraordinary journeys to get to this point, what it's like to work with your sibling, the ethos and values and principles behind Two Field, their connection with their local community in Greece, and the legacy they hope to leave behind. I really hope you enjoy this special conversation. Welcome, Will, to the Evolve to Succeed podcast.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
I'm really excited about our conversation today. We're going to talk about, the business that you've got, Two Fields with your brother, how it's slightly unique, slightly quirky, and all of those kind of things. It's got some great principles and values behind it. I want us to talk about all of those things. But for our listeners, we should probably start with you just talking us through the journey of how you and your brother Harry came to be olive oil producers in Greece.
Yeah, it was certainly never the plan, that's for sure.
It's not an everyday story, is it?
But we were actually on holiday in Crete, and when we were there in Zakros, which is like a tiny village of about 800 to 1,000 people, we were visiting, and my brother met his now wife and fell in love, and within a few months had moved there to be together.
Wow.
So that's kind of, and it's funny because it's kind of interesting reflecting back on how my brother's choices have kind of impacted my life as much as anything else. So, and really when we all kind of fell in love with just Zakros, it's a farming community. Every family farms. Okay. Every family owns 200, 300, 400 olive trees, and that kind of craft and that land has really been passed down the generations. So there's something incredibly beautiful about it. The olive oil is beautiful as well, and so that really kind of captivated us. Yeah. But I think as we transitioned from kind of spending time or visiting to really spending time and becoming part of a community and part of a family, we scratched beneath the surface and were kind of confronted with the conventional farming system for the first time. Okay. And that kind of beautiful craft and that kind of system that wasn't really valuing it.
Okay, there was kind of a clash.
There was a clash, yeah. And that kind of was the start of the seed that kind of set us off.
So what were you, I'm just going to need to ask this, what were you doing before your brother Harry fell in love and you ended doing this? I mean, did you have a background in food and sustainability or anything like that?
No, well, we didn't have any background in food or farming. Okay. But my background was in design, and so industrial design, more like product design. Okay. But kind of specialised, I guess, in sustainability. Particularly excited about sustainability, I'd always been, and design was always a kind of vehicle to allow me to do sustainable environmental things. Okay. But I was at university and becoming, to be honest, increasingly frustrated at the lack of kind of emphasis on it. So, that kind of, all of those things kind of connected it with Two Fields. And I've always had a great love for food, just never in a sense of business or doing anything around that. So.
Okay. And Harry's background prior to this?
He was at university. He studied he studied business, although I think that's a long, a distant memory. And then he was in Australia for a little while as a waiter and working front of house, and kind of, I think we were both at points in our lives where we weren't kind of set down that path.
Yeah, you were looking for something and what your meaning would be and what you do. And
and I think all of those things, both not having that path maybe, and also not knowing anything about the food industry or farming, while incredibly daunting, is quite freeing in a lot of ways. You're not constrained by, ideas that have been passed down to you, or ideas you think you need to do this way. We had no idea.
You're free. You're kind of free to think how you want to think and do the things you want to do, haven't you? Which is the great thing about starting a business when you're so young.
Yeah, exactly. And I do wonder sometimes. I think every person maybe who starts a business must think this. If I knew everything that I knew when we were going to start, would we start? Or
would we ever do it?
Yeah.
I think the answers are quite firm no, probably will, in terms of that. Some of the experiences and challenges, we'll come on to some of those. So this is, if I'm right, and if I got the dates wrong, I apologise, this is around 2013-14. So you go to Crete, your brother falls in love, he goes to Zakros, you obviously go and visit. How do you? I'm still fascinated. You get involved in the community. The community's, olive farmers, and you get involved. But how do you go from that to then producing this great product that you now market? The 2 Fields olive oil.
Yeah, I mean, and there's kind of been 2 big steps in that journey. But I think the first was really when my brother was in Greece. Originally, he started working in the fields. Okay. And that was really as a way to make some money, to get by, right? And because he had to earn something to stay there, and that's the industry. So he worked in the fields, he worked in the local shop, he worked in the factory, and kind of slowly picked up a bit of knowledge. I was at university and had long summers, so I used to just spend all my summers there. So and I think we just kind of we felt like there was something not right. Like there was this beautiful thing and something not right. And just over long conversations over a beer, these ideas kept kind of coming back, and there was something beautiful there. And then really my brother became, or both of us really became apprentices to local farmers, and we started to learn much more directly. And then we kind of saved up and we bought our own 2 fields, and that's 2 acres, so super small. I think when we talk about farming, we might have other ideas, much more like an apple orchard than anything else. Yeah. And so actually it was when I was on my placement year, and I was meant to be doing placement at uni, and we'd been searching for fields, and it's not super easy to get fields.
No, and they're passed down the generations, they don't surely come on the market that often.
Yeah, and also when you're when you're looking for fields, you want them to be right. You want to make sure there's certain things, and Jenny Eleni's father-in-law really helped us with that. And actually my first half of my placement fell through, and the day it fell through, my brother phoned, and I was like, what am I going to do? And my brother phoned to say, I found the fields. And I was like, well, I'm free, so
I'm just going to go and get on a plane and I'll be with you.
And so that was the kind of the seed that started it. But then fast forward a chunk, and that was really around, we spent a lot of time. Well, we were focused on regenerative farming. We were becoming apprentices and learning how to farm, and we can kind of delve into that a bit. Yeah. But that started with 1 pallet of bottles, super small, and that sold out, and that became 2 pallets of bottles. And the whole premise was we handpick our olives, we hand number every bottle, and every drop comes from our 2 fields. So complete transparency. But then through a kind of set of other circumstances, most recently, about 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago, we launched a community collective. So instead of growing and becoming bigger in a bigger farm, we realised that actually, through some of the huge challenges facing our community, what we need is more small farmers who are farming regeneratively and rebuilding their
land. So they're following your principles, they're following the values, they're doing it sustainably, regeneratively.
Yeah, exactly.
And then become part of a collective.
And so really now the majority of our business, 2 Fields, has kind of evolved, and it's around teaching these practices on the ground, providing local farming families with fair livelihoods, and then partnering with restaurants directly in the UK. So there's been a kind of change as we started as a kind of more D2C business, and now we're a little bit more B2C, although we run that a little bit differently. And so there's always been this kind of constant evolution.
Yeah, but that's business, isn't it? As you start in business, you start with what you can do and what works, and then you sort of grow and you pivot and you find new opportunities, and that's about being entrepreneurial and finding your way, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's exciting, and it's also really exciting to have the opportunity to kind of give back to the community that now everything we have, you know, our family, you know, how we make a living, the kind of skills and craft, they were all given to us, right? And so to be able to try to help in another way is really amazing.
And I suppose, you know, with Harry and Elena and that relationship and those kind of things, I suppose there was no issue and you were always welcomed into the community, or was there a strange look at any point that these two English lads that come here, they want to be olive, you know, farmers? Was there any moment of angst in there? No,
I think we were really blessed that we were welcomed so amazingly by Elena's family, and particularly Yanni, her father-in-law, kind of took us under his wing and taught us so much. So I think one of the big factors in that is that actually farming really helped in that. Because suddenly you have a deep understanding of what people are doing, and suddenly, you know, I remember when I finished my first harvest, one of the guys in the village came around and put his arm around me and said, "Oh, you're from Zakros now." You know, there's a real identity and culture around olive farming, and so I think being part of that made a huge difference. Yeah. And now, you know, especially with the community collective, when things get difficult in the fields, and farming is incredibly difficult, there's something powerful about a farmer being able to look left and see you on the line as well, you know, worried about your livelihood as well, and be in the field, not kind of this distance thing.
I suppose it's part of you became part and immersed yourself in the community, and then therefore, I mean, they're lovely people, aren't they? So, you know, that part of the world, so they're going to be welcoming. And
I mean, that's not to say there wasn't, you know, funny moments for sure. I mean, when we started, we talk a lot about soil health and microbiology, and you know, through a culture and a language barrier, we were like, there's these invisible microbes in the soil and they're going to save the world. And you kind of have local farmers being like, you should try and pick an olive first. Maybe.
Do the basics first. Brilliant. And so for our listeners, perhaps we should, and I'm really intrigued to understand this, is the difference between commercial olive farming and regenerative olive farming.
Yeah, so broadly speaking, as kind of an idea and a concept to think about, I would say on one end of the scale, which would be the kind of commercial, you have perfect rows of olive trees, you have big tractors, you might even have clamps that come around the base of the trees and shape the trees. Okay. You may read about dangers to birds with these machines, big monocultures, no biodiversity, and ultimately lots of chemicals sprayed. Okay. And so what you have is, if you can imagine the roots of an olive tree, they're almost like it's like on a drip. Yeah. It's like a chemical life support. Okay. And so there's no natural resistance or vibrancy in the fields. And that is all around a system that prioritizes quantity. Yeah. And so if you're selling to a huge company and you've never left Greece and you only have one selling option, and that big company is pushing you down on price year on year, you kind of have to produce more.
That commercialization of it comes to the forward, isn't it?
And really, we've got to be really careful when we talk about it, because, you know, 70 years ago in Zakros, when the kind of chemical revolution happened, you'd be mad not to want to spray chemicals. If someone said, "Oh, you know, you're worried about the pests and you want bigger yields and you want security and you want to de-risk,
and here's your solution,"
and you'd go, "Wow, of course." And of course, I think what's happened over that time is we had a buffer in a way, and we didn't see all of those consequences immediately. And now that buffer has really come to an end, and we're seeing the consequences of what that means. And we're seeing, you know, soil that's brittle and lifeless, and ultimately, I think what a regenerative system is the other end of that spectrum for us, because we have trees. The perfect thing is a forest, right? Okay. And so everything we're trying to do is to become more forest and farm. We plant diverse cover crops, so we have lots of biodiversity and greenery in our fields. We collect the microbes which I talked about. You can dig under the surface of a natural forest and you can see the mycelium and you smell all that microbial life. You can collect that and turn it into teas and sprays to bring life back into your fields.
Okay.
We have local manure. We focus on circular farming principles, so all of our offcuts are wood chipped and mulched and returned to the land, like how in a forest the leaves would fall and feed the soil.
They mulch and they become part of the soil again.
And so it's been a kind of this process of reading lots of books and finding people to follow online and piece by piece putting this together. And actually one of our big challenges in the beginning was in 2015 when we kind of fell in love with all of this. Even in the UK, the idea of regenerative and that conversation hadn't bubbled back up to the surface. And so in those first couple of years, it could feel really isolating, right? To be like, we're talking about this thing and we've never really, not having the confidence of having years of farming behind you and not being able to connect with anyone personally who kind of knew that. And then we kind of connected in with a few people in Cornwall and then one person in Greece, and that kind of, it all kind of came together. But I think ultimately the reason regenerative is important, it's important environmentally, because we need to, we're storing more carbon in our soils, we're utilising water, we're doing some amazing, we're increasing biodiversity, we're making sure we have insect life. All of that's really important. But on a practical level, in Greece, we're a village of 800 or 1,000. Everyone's livelihood comes from farming. And we love in this country to talk about fair livelihoods and paying people fairly. And that is really important. But if you don't do it time and time again and build a relationship, then it doesn't matter. And you can do that as well, but it also doesn't matter if you don't have olives on the trees, right? So when we talk about fair, secure livelihoods, we actually need to talk about land security, building resilient ecosystems that year after year can grow food to support people. And all of that starts with the soil. Okay. And we felt that firsthand, where there's been years that have been difficult and other people have struggled and we've been good.
Right, and because you've looked after the land and I'm going to say invested back in, but protected, invested the time and effort to make sure the land produces.
Exactly right. It is investing because, ultimately we take from our land. Yeah. We produce olives and we go into the press and we produce, and you can't just take. No. You have to give back. And you have to have a mindset, and I think, farming does this, which has really helped in our business as well. You have to have a mindset. These trees have been here for 75 years, 80 years, long before we don't really own the land. Yeah. We're just looking after it for this period.
Do you think you're custodians of the land? Is that how you feel?
Yeah, completely. And much more so now after... very sadly losing Yanni, Eleni's father, who kind of taught us everything, and having the honour and also scary honour of being past his fields and looking after that land is, and that's like looking after the master's trees, and that's an incredibly exciting thing, but also a really nerve-wracking thing.
It's an honour, but with it comes lots of responsibility.
Yeah, and it also, all of that goes to support Eleni and her mother-in-law, or our mother-in-law, Katerina, her mother, Yanni's wife. So there's a livelihood piece in that as well. But, to be given the opportunity to look after trees that someone has spent their whole life tending and looking after and loving, and from being there, that relationship, you do feel like that, and you hope as well. And in that process, it gives real depth as well, because you understand that you've been passed on something. And we used to really talk, when Yanni was alive and we kind of talked about Two Fields, we used to talk about the passing of the craft. We're being actively. And when he passed away, that had happened, right? That craft had been passed. And so it would be a great honour for us to be able to do that as well, in a way.
Incredible. It's just, hairs on the back of my neck is standing up when you talk about that. And it's just great to see the amount of values and ethos. But, a lot of businesses talk about having values, don't they? I often say they have these values, they put them on a wall, they put them in a leaflet, they put them on a website, but they don't behave aligned to them. What I'm getting from this conversation is, your business with Harry is based on a real strong sense of right, wrong, ethos, values, and you live and breathe them.
Yeah, and I think, in part that's because farming is like, it's our life as much as it's a business, with all the challenges that come with that as well.
But it'd be easy when you must have had some difficult harvests. And when you have a difficult harvest, the challenge might be, right, next year we just need that great yield. What can we do? And and others may put their values aside at that point and go, we just need to increase our yield. We need to put some chemicals on. We need to do these things, but just stick with it year in, year out. And I don't know. Do the yields vary? Am I getting that right, wrong?
Yeah, especially in the beginning when you do the transition, and I mean we find that like I said, we have that natural resistance now, and we're able to ride more difficult times. But that doesn't mean there's certainly challenges all along, and there's challenges for every farmer, regardless of what system you're in. Right, farming is really hard.
Crop you're trying to farm and grow.
And also for us, a bit. Olives are a once a year crop. So you work all year, and if the week before there's a hailstorm or there's wind and you lose everything, you have nothing, right? So that's the nature of the beast, and so of course, but we've always been super clear that those values mattered to us, and that was, I think the difference is, we didn't want to become olive farmers and then think about our values. Yeah. We wanted to do this. We wanted to do it differently, and therefore we became olive farmers in order to do that. And I think when you spend so much time, and be it the business, be it the brand, be it farming, you spend so much time and energy and stress and worry about getting this thing right, that it takes a long time to build something, and very quickly it can be destroyed if you take the misstep, or you cut the corner, or you do that. And again, I think that's something that farming teaches you. You're in it for the long haul, and we want to have that approach in the business, right? Yeah. And so, and we've built our business on direct relationships. So with the restaurant setup and the community project, we work directly with chefs. There's no distributors involved. Okay. So we are literally responsible for every step, from picking every olive and working with our farmers to delivering every box. We do use a courier, but and so all of those relationships are built on that depth. They're built on that transparency. They're built on those principles. Yeah, the
principles, ethos, values are what the chefs are buying into, aren't they? They're not buying from a distributor and just need olive oil. They're buying everything you represent.
Yeah, and it works the other way as well. We choose to work with chefs who get it. Yeah. And we last year had meetings with chefs where it wasn't right. And we said, no, you know what, I'm not sure this is right. Because when we work with another restaurant and we bring a restaurant in, it means that we can go to Zakros and we can bring another farming family on board. Okay. Or maybe 3 restaurants means another farming family. And actually, if you had 50% of your restaurants leave every year, you're replacing one insecure system for another insecure system. Yeah. So we say to people, we need, obviously we understand things change. Yeah. We understand we've got to nurture this relationship. But we want you to come on board with the idea of the longevity of this project.
A commitment, yeah.
Come out to Greece, be part of it. We want to get farmers over here and it's so funny. I think sometimes if your grandfather and grandmother farmed and blah blah blah, I think sometimes olive farming, especially for young people, maybe not the most exciting thing ever. And I want to say, in Dorset in London, some of the coolest restaurants think what you're doing is amazing. It's like a shifted perspective. So
and we talked a lot about the farming side, but clearly and we started to touch on the commercialization there in a way, but how did you and your brother find, you've learned the farming, you've learned the techniques, came up with your ethos values, you start to tend to the land and the olive trees, but there's another side, isn't there, which is create a brand, create a business, sell the product. How was that as a transition? How was that experience for you both?
I think it was difficult. It's been when we had no links in the food industry, I
suppose out of uni, farming apprentices that done the education bit, I suppose.
And it wasn't like, oh, I've been a chef in 4 kitchens, and so or anything like that. I think the biggest shift, and I do want to talk about the beginning, but the biggest shift recently has been shifting from selling our 2 fields to becoming part of a community project.
Okay.
And that's really allowed me to kind of shed any issues I've had with selling.
Yeah.
And been like, you know what, this isn't about me anymore. Okay. This is about the community, and I'm going to be in this meeting, and I'm going to do everything I can. I think when you're talking about yourself and look, this is this, and this, sometimes that can be a little bit difficult. So I think that's been really interesting.
Okay, that transition between effectively selling your product to representing a community and selling the community's product. Yeah. And
so, but I mean, I remember when we did the label, we did the bottling, and then we had to do the logistics, and we didn't know how to do any of that. And I remember my brother saying, "Are we ready?" I said, "I think so. I don't really know." And I remember the pallet arriving at home, the first pallet arriving at home, and I remember thinking, we'd done it. Yeah. Like, we've done it. And then my brother being like, well, we've got to sell it.
We've made it. We've got it to the UK. Now we need to generate revenue.
And then, the first bottle we sold was to my uncle, and then it was to my neighbour. And I think we've been very lucky to have met people along the way who've really bought into what we're doing. So we've met some amazing delis and amazing chefs, particularly when we started with the restaurant project. Yeah. There's a group of bakeries and restaurants in London called Jolene. Okay. And then also the Pig locally. Yeah. We met both of those before we even had community oil in the country, and we just had a sample. Okay. And James Golding at the Pig is an amazing chef and really champions this sort of thing. And we sat down, and both of them said, I remember cold emailing Jolene, being super nervous to go in. Yeah. They gave me a tour. They filled me with food. We sat for an hour with the owner to talk about it, and the same with James at the Pig. And at the end, they backed us, and they backed us before we had oil. So they tasted the sample, but it wasn't like we could deliver the next week. We said, "Oh, just give us a moment,
another season." Type thing.
Yeah, and so I think from a business point of view, that obviously makes a big difference. But from a point of view of like, we're going on a whole new project now. We've got these 2 amazing people who believe it. Suddenly you think, you know what, we can do this. And meeting great people who believe in what you're doing and willing to back you is so, that's such a difference to if not anything else, the confidence that it can happen. And I think going back to that idea of values and principles and ethos, those relationships are so much deeper and more meaningful because of that.
Because they're buying based on the values, the ethos and the principles, aren't they?
Yeah, and they want to be part of that.
Yeah, they want to be part of the journey with you, which makes it a completely different customer-supplier relationship, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And we're so, now we work with a handful of restaurants, and locally we also work with Roots down in Southbourne, which is an amazing restaurant. And, also you spend all that time and energy and love producing something. You want it to go to people who value it and cherish it, and and you produce it to share. And so the idea that these amazing chefs and the people who go and eat there, and going in, and I get photos from friends like, oh, look at the back of the Pig menu, it's got 2, and that's like the most amazing kind of feeling and excitement. Although it is slightly interesting because you go back to Zakros and you say, we're in the Pig, and that doesn't mean anything to anyone.
They look around you and thinking you're mad. And how does it feel? You've been on this journey with your brother, so by the sounds of it, from the early part of the story, it sounds like you're always close. How's it been, as 2 siblings going on this journey together?
It's been interesting. I mean, we have our moments. We're incredibly close, and we're best friends. So I think that makes a big difference. I think the thing is that even if it's not completely defined perfectly where we're going, through those values and through what we believe in, we know the direction we're heading. Yeah. And so we make to be honest, we make all of our decisions together, and we're able to do that because we're so small. But even if one of us was to make a decision that the other disagreed with, actually we know it was in the same direction, just a different path of getting there. Yeah. And I think that allows for a different kind of relationship and to be a bit more, we're not kind of pulling in two different directions, and there's that friction there. So even when there are bumps in the road, then you kind of are like, well, I can kind of see, you know, why you would think that and how we would get there. And I think sometimes it means with farming and with business and it being family, there's no escape. No. And
it's 24/7.
I think that's particularly probably for my brother, because I'm 27 and apart from two fields, don't have loads of responsibilities. Yeah. He's married with his family with a baby girl, and so I have to check myself sometimes, that kind of 1 a.m. text or that, you know, or I've been thinking about this, or you know, and also the rhythms in Greece and England. We're on you know, sometimes if we need to do something, I can send out 4 emails and generally it will get done pretty quickly. Yeah. It's not always how it works in Greece. And not because of my brother, because, you know, and
culture, way of life.
So there's all those kind of things. But ultimately, when you do have those successes, there's no one you'd rather share it with. Yeah. And I think, and I know this sounds a little bit harsh, but I think the truth is, like, no one cares like you care, and no one understands it like you do. So to have someone kind of in the trenches for the good and the bad when it's all going on, and you can turn and you just don't feel completely on your own, makes a huge difference.
Absolutely, I can see that. And I think something that everybody can take away, isn't it, is that, you know, be it in business with family or with others, or, you know, you're just trying to lead a team, it's that alignment to a goal, isn't it? You've got a strong sense of purpose and what you want to achieve, and I suppose it's that, like you said, absolutely, it's that alignment that drives you together, and then at least you're going in the same direction at, you know, so at times maybe at different paces, but you know exactly where you want to be.
And I think another huge thing is the communication piece in that. You know, and I think two of the things that we've got much better at are, one, someone saying, actually no, like, it's Sunday, I'm just going to actually, I'm going to the beach with my family, or I know I'm going to go and see my friends, and we're putting a, you know, and because also one of the things about running a business is you can just work. You can just work whenever you want and how long ever you want, or you can get caught in the trap of, I need to rest, and then you don't work, and then you'll rest, you know, and so you have to kind of catch yourself in both, I think. And the other thing I think we've become much better at, especially as things have got the kind of, I guess the pressure has built in some way. Now we're meeting some really, you know, I mean, we've always worked with great top chefs, but you think you get bigger opportunities, right? And I think something we've both become better at is protecting each other and saying, you know, especially maybe me in the UK here, when I'm meeting the chefs and I go, well, I've got this meeting. Then you go in and then you kind of have to phone up and report back to Greece, you know, and everyone wants to know. And sometimes it's not always good news. No. And it's, and I think we become better at protecting each other, and being like, well, it's not personal, it's not your fault that failed, or how can we do that better? Or, you know, if it's tricky in the field, saying, I'm not saying, well, come on, mate, what you know, it's
come on, we need that produce.
I think we've become better at that, which has made a big difference as well.
And typically you're based in the UK, Harry's based over there?
Yes, and Harry's there pretty much full time, and I'm in the UK pretty much full time. I'm in Greece throughout the year. I try not to fly too often, to be honest. I go out for long periods rather than short periods. I'm there in the winter through harvest for a couple of months. And then, for example, now we've just got a new, we've just taken over kind of an old lemonade factory in Greece, actually, to turn into a community hub and to have a storage and things. And so that's quite a big job to get it up. So I'm going to go out there and we're going to spend a few weeks getting that all together. So there's no rhyme or reason. We just kind of see how it goes. But always in the winter for the harvest. Yeah. And that's, again, we kind of set almost non-negotiables. Two of them are, one, I'm always for the harvest. Okay. You know, I never want to be disconnected from that. That is what we do. That is why we do what we do. And number two was that Two Fields, you know, especially coming from a creative background, I said Two Fields always has to have a platform for us to do creative projects. Okay. So we tell the story about, there was a salt ban in Greece, and we told this beautiful story about the salt ban, and then we went and collected salt, and we sold 100 pouches of salt, and we didn't sell it wasn't a good business decision, right?
No.
It was a lot of time and it wasn't a lot of money, but we were excited about that story,
Yeah.
and I kind of sat down and I wrote it all, and we took the photos, and those are the projects that get me excited, and I want, if we're in charge and we're creating this thing, I want it to allow us to do that kind
Business
of stuff.
has got to be there for you rather than you be there for it.
Yeah.
Which is a mistake that so many of us make in business, is that we start with these ideas, these principles, this kind of balance we want, or whatever it may be we want to achieve, and we have that focus, passion and belief, but somewhere along the way, and it's great to hear that you and Harry aren't in this place, but so many of us somewhere along that journey lose our way a little bit, and the business starts to control us and dictate our lives, our rhythm, how much time we spend with our family, how much time we do the other things we love. Do we act for the right kind of clients? Do we do the things that initially made us happy? And it takes quite a strong will and personality to not let that happen.
And I think it's a constant thing, right?
Yeah.
It's a constant checking in, a constant reflection on all of those things.
Yeah, definitely. And where do you see Two Fields in... I'm going to ask one of those typical podcast questions now, but where do you see Two Fields in 5-10 years' time?
I think one of the most exciting things about Two Fields is that it, and like we talked about, is that it is evolved and it's unfolded. And so, when we started Two Fields and it was every drop comes from our two fields, I was so headstrong, probably. I was like, we would never ever sell a drop of oil from, and then suddenly it kind of opens up that, actually we could do something really good here, and we could help people. So I do have that sense that things unfold and I want to watch them unfold.
Yeah.
But certainly we don't have aspirations to be a huge business. We will only ever work within our community, within our region. We want to get more families on board. We've got families waiting to join the project. We want to work with more chefs. So that's certainly something we want to do. For me, there's two kind of bigger goals, which are, we have an aging population in Zakros, and young people are leaving and young people aren't taking up farming. So if we can kind of inspire and excite young people to be part of that farming journey and keep young people and kind of have a bit of a renaissance of that would be super exciting. And the second is, I want, like I said, this isn't about us anymore, and I want people to be part of that. Yeah. And so we work with farmers who've got way more experience than us. And when we sat down at the beginning, especially with the first families, and with the first chefs, we said, well, you want to be honest, we don't have any idea what we're doing. and so what we have is this relationship where we're being helped as much as we're helping. Yeah. And so I would love it, especially with young people, even if it isn't farming, but someone went and did finance, or someone went and did marketing, they could bring those skills and they could shape this thing, and they could be kind of proud of what it is. And so that's kind of where I would like to take it. And then finally, I would like to build a model to give away for people to do in their communities. So I think there's something really important about change from the ground up. And I think it's really difficult to make change if you're not in a community. You don't understand the nuances of a community. You don't know how it all operates. And again, like I said, you don't have that feeling of being in it together.
Belonging. Yeah.
And so we've had people contact us from Spain and Italy. Would you take our olives, or would you do this? No, we don't understand that. It's not us, and that's not. And I spend a lot of my time writing emails, giving advice, and sending all that stuff out. It's a joy to do. But what I'd love to do is build a blueprint to say, this is our community collective. Yeah. This is how we've done it. We don't have all the answers. Here are some of the bigger challenges. Here are some of the things that really helped. Yeah. Because ultimately, that's how we got into regenerative farming, by having those resources, by people being abundantly generous with that. And so to be able to do that would be really, really great as well.
Brilliant. And you clearly see this as a legacy business, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's so personal, and it's so, and how our roles evolve in that, who knows?
Yeah.
But yes, 100%. I think, particularly for both of us, but on the farming side, I think particularly for my brother, it would be such a beautiful thing to be able to pass down, and as he was passed, we were past the trees, and for sure I see this kind of hopefully, and that's also that changes every decision we make. You have to see every decision through a lens. Yeah. And I know this sounds weird, and maybe all the business experts there are cringing, but that's actually somewhat tempered our growth.
Okay.
Because we have never wanted to like shoot to the sky, and I mean we have grown incredibly quickly.
Yeah.
But we've always been, instead of being vertical, let's make sure we're going.
Yeah.
As you know, let's take our time, let's get these decisions right, and let's make sure we build a business that's relevant in 10 years, and that people and the relationships that people get stronger over time and don't diminish. And so that has affected all the decisions we make in Two Fields.
I think that's I admire you and the admiration for you, because again it comes back to what we were talking about earlier during the conversation, Will, is that you've got these principles, you've got these values, you've got this ethos, you know what you want to do and how you're going to go about doing it, and therefore the pace of business growth is dictated by that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's as I said earlier, a lot of businesses try and shoot for the stars, but without some of those foundations in place. And sometimes it just takes a bit longer to get to where you want to get to. But doing it in the right way is a great thing to have achieved, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been, the most challenging and exciting and rewarding thing. And I think I say to people like, business is like the hardest thing I've ever done. And then you go, well, actually farming's probably one of the hardest, but there's great it's very fulfilling to do that.
And as we start to wrap up the conversation, just, two final questions. One is, what have you learned about yourself during this journey?
I think that you can do it and that it's possible, right? I think sometimes you can sit and you can think people have a knowledge that you don't have, or they have a this that you don't have, and we've been, like I said, we've been incredibly supported in that way. But I think just that you can do it, and it's about connecting with the people, and I've certainly learned what I'm not very good at, and and what I need help on. I think, and also the importance of unknowing that, and saying, right, actually, I need someone to help me with the numbers, because that's a little bit not in my versus actually I really know. I feel like I'm good at storytelling and I'm good at the brand, and I really want to kind of own that part of it. And so I think learning yourself what you're good at and what you're not good at matters, but also that it's possible and that you can do it.
Brilliant. But playing to your strengths and knowing your weaknesses and getting those covered is, it is one of the routes to success, definitely. And I suppose talking about success, I always end with this final question. What's your personal definition of success, Will?
At the moment, right now, and I think this may change as my life changes, but it's freedom. So it's to have the ability to do what I love, to do that anywhere, and to be kind of excited by that. I'm building something that I hope is allowing, not restrictive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people want to learn more about you, more about Harry, more about the Two Fields story, where can they go?
They could go to our website or our Instagram, which is Two Fields, TWO, the word, Zakros, which is Zakros.
Brilliant, fantastic. Thank you, Will, for being a great guest on the Evolve to Succeed podcast. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I love the ethos and the principles you've got. I'm going to be going to that website, listening and buying a bottle of Two Fields olive oil. It needs to be done. I need to try it. I haven't had the conversation. Thank you for being a great guest on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Evolve to Succeed podcast. My hope with every episode is that you've learned something new or heard something that challenged your way of thinking and further motivated you on your path towards becoming a more knowledgeable, informed and inspired individual and business leader. If you enjoyed this episode, then please help us by rating, reviewing and subscribing. We really value your feedback and would love to have you along for future episodes. And please don't forget to learn more about Evolve by going to evolvemembers.com. Thank you for listening. See you next week.